We talk about money in politics, incumbency. As viewers of the show probably will know, I'm a proponent of term limits. I think that some of the, not all, it's not a panacea, but I think some of the problems that we inherently have might be solved. Do you have any thoughts or opinions on term limits?
Well, term limits are an outright limit on incumbency. The counterweight to the advantages that are certainly there with term limits. You certainly get new blood and a fresh perspective on the issues. Is that if you're stripping out a level of experience amongst elected officials, and God knows the issues are complex and the laws in our government are complex and it takes a while to learn all of that. If you put in term limits, basically you're shifting a power balance from elected officials to bureaucrats, and you empower the bureaucrats who are there on a career basis, and they serve for 30 or 40 years perhaps. Is that a good thing?
Well, I'm not sure that it is or it isn't, but to me, the term limits, and people, I've had discussions with a lot of people over the years, and they talk about, well, we have elections, those are term limits. And my reply to that is, well, if we really, if the elections really did anything, first of all, you have a Congress that's got an 18% approval rating. I'm not sure that most people would have such a problem with term limits and people having to have new faces in there. But if they wanted to stay in government, let's say, just use Chris Shays as an example, while he was a congressman. Now, I'm not saying that after 20 years or whatever the number of years that would be ideal, he'd be out, but you have to then run for a different seat. He's now going for Senate. You can stay in government, but you got to keep proving yourself by going to a different level of government. Was it John Adams or John Quincy? I think it was John Adams. Didn't he go back into the House after he was president? So it was either John or John Quincy, but I think it was John Adams.
Not sure. That's interesting. That's someone like the British Premier, who's actually, is he not elected as a member of the House? And then technically he is House of Commons. Technically he is the first amongst the commoners, and selected as such by his party.
Well, with all the money in politics, special interests, do you have some thoughts in putting together some questions for our show today? I think when people hear special interests, what pops to most people's mind are the pharmaceutical industry or the oil industry, or my field, the insurance industry.
Right.
Do you feel that there's a little bit of a disconnect in that, to me, there's an education industry, and everyone has an agenda.
Right.
And do you find that people, compartmentalize this so much that the education industry, for example, is not thought of as a special interest, yet I believe that they are one of the largest special interests? What are your feelings on that? Do people recognize, or do they feel my hypothesis is completely off base?
Well, on a very broad level, without getting into the NEA and the education unions, and getting into the public unions, which is a whole separate discussion that is probably highly heated in our current environment. Without going there, just in broad kind of strokes, I think what I mentioned earlier, checks and balances. I think that transparency and disclosure is the check on moneyed interests and lobbyists. Disclose the sources of their money and their backing, transparency on what they do. Our lobbyists are registered. Thirdly, you have what we are doing here today. You have a free press and the media. And the press and the media have a function that's very important in our political process. They're the ones who, with laws in place for transparency, they go find out who's backing what lobbying interest. And if there's something untoward underway, you're going to see a newspaper article about it. The New York Times or the Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg is going to be doing investigative journalism, and they're going to reveal exactly the kind of things that we as citizens don't want going on with special interests driving the process, because that can go on in the back rooms, in the smoke-filled rooms, out of the public spotlight. But if you have transparency laws and disclosure laws, the press will get in there and reveal that, and that's self-correcting in an important way.
Yeah. I probably should have prefaced my remarks by saying I'm the product of public education through college. My daughter is a professor at Florida State,
right,
and my son-in-law is a teacher in the public schools in Tallahassee. So
it's a good thing that I didn't take your bait to comment on the education.
And we had some discussions, and I honestly, a lot of my clientele are teachers and administrators. Right. I just think that the crisis that we've been through, the economic crisis, the last 4 years, there have to be a lot of things on the table that just seemed completely off the table before.
Right.
As far as I had some other things here. We don't have. We've been running a little late, but I wanted to get into a couple of things. Also, I have been actually registered in my early years as a Democrat, and I've also been registered as a Republican. Again, we're maybe a little off the subject, although it has to deal with politics and the issues at hand. I believe Democrats are much more articulate in getting their message out than the Republicans are. I feel that it's generally easier to say yes than it is to be the party of no. And do you have any thoughts on trying to deal with, again, maybe taking on the sacred cow of entitlements, or again, the whole economic situation that we find ourselves in? Do you have any comments on, it seems to me, I think the Senate hasn't passed a budget for well over 1,000 days.
Right.
Yet it's very easy to attack a House member who's put together a proposal, and I'm not necessarily saying that it's perfect, but it's a starting point. Do you have any thoughts on how we might get past all this?
Well, first,
in 1 minute or less now.
1 minute or less. 1 minute or less. I'm going to pull out of that, out of your remarks there, the one item that Democrats are more articulate than Republicans, and I don't subscribe to that at all. I think that the great communicator was Ronald Reagan, a Republican. I rest my case.
Okay, well, not to debate it, but also then I think have Bill Clinton and Barack Obama. But again,
I think Reagan will go down in history as a much better communicator than Barack Obama.
Okay. Now, again, little maybe controversial. In my career as an insurance and financial advisor going back to the 70s, I've dealt with people in all walks of life and in all stages of life. And I've just, again, a quick couple of thoughts. I kind of have two theories. That first, the Democrats, not all, but a part of them like to promise programs and in effect buy votes. And it's sort of become, I feel, a little insidious, because I find that when I would talk to clients years ago, 70s and 80s, things that would never be assumed that they would have to look to government for are now being looked to government for. For example, long-term care, when they try to put in the Class Act in the Obama bill. Do you have any thoughts on that as far as the buying votes? And then I'll get to the Reagan, where I sometimes wonder if the large tax cuts were a way to almost kind of stop feeding at the trough with new programs. So take whichever or both.
Well, they're both. because very interestingly, it's referred to as the two Santa strategy. As you articulated, the Democrats' strategy is to give things away, which is an easy way to curry the voters' favor. Confronted with that reality, the Republicans, who'd been the party of no, historically, I'm not talking about now, they historically had been somewhat like Dad knows best, we don't have the resources, sorry, we can't buy that. That is not a terribly popular position, as any father who's had that responsibility in his own family knows very well. A couple of Republican philosophers and theorists developed was known as the second Santa. Republicans would give away tax cuts. So indeed, we now have a competition in Washington between Democrats who want to give things away and Republicans who want to give tax cuts away. It is, in either case, what we're doing is ensuring our financial ruin. Giving ever more away and collecting ever less revenue to fund that is very easy for anyone at any level of education to understand as a formula for disaster.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're going to wrap up our show now. Again, I'd like to thank our tonight's guest, Red Janke, president of the Townsend Group International, a management consulting firm in Greenwich, for appearing on the show. I'd also like to remind our viewers that our air dates on Charter Channel 21 are Mondays at 4:30 and Thursdays at 7. We also post segments up on YouTube, so you can look for us there. We'd love to hear from you, whether it be comments on prior shows, ideas for future shows, or just comments, suggestions, or guests you'd like to see. So you can contact us at brookfieldpublicadvocate@yahoo.com. Again, thanks for watching, and good night.
One down.
One-